So, Sage, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Mm. Uh, I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and yes, I'm quite interested about economics since it's the main source of problems of my country, as some of you may already know.
Alrighty. So, basically, what the concept of a zombie economy, as I'm defining it, is the current state of the United States with inflation, rising interest rates, and QE, bailouts, COVID relief. All of this is all stimulated into what is known as a zombie economy. Basically, the economy is dead, and the government is stimulating the economy to what we know as a fake economy, so to speak. So as more government involvement gets involved into the economy, it affects the global economy as a whole. And as you're seeing in like China is going through currently going through depression. Europe's headed towards depression. Some countries like Germany and England are actually in depression. The United States is technically in a recession, technically in depression. But it's the whole guise is that the government is here to save you, and all they're doing is just prolonging what I call a zombie economy. So that being said, Sage, do you have any input that you would like to say about that, or what's going on in relevance to Argentina regarding this zombie economy?
Mm, I have noticed the pattern that what you have said pretty much, specifically in the past government, since in 2023 was the last year of the last government that was led by Alberto Fernandez. So with this kind of stuff, I have seen that they have tried to do something like that, but in a worse way because of the it was an election year, obviously. First, we had this man, well, the ex candidate to presidency now, Sergio Mazza, who was at the time in 2023, the Minister of Economy of Argentina. So this guy was behind the great printing of money of the country, which is the Argentinian peso. Well, the situation was so bad that he was trying to, you know, give as much money as possible for obviously increasing his voters. Obviously, the problem is that obviously that's going to cause inflation. Inflation at the time was so bad that the central bank of Argentina was not printing all of the pesos that we had. Places like China and African countries, they were hired specifically for their printing machines for creating more pesos. So the large amount of Argentinian pesos that were printed at the time was expected to be now in this year like 60 60,000% of inflation, like from one month to the next one, so much, pretty much. So yeah, that sounds pretty much what you were saying, on this sense. But on the sense of the government trying to take care of you, they were selling this idea a lot of, yeah, this the economy is not regulated by itself. The invisible hand doesn't exist and stuff like that. The government is there to help you. The government is there to build you have houses, schools, hospitals, and stuff. Well, one of the reasons that we're doing this was obviously corruption. Anywhere that the Argentinian state had their hand on anything, like building a place, I don't know, giving food to the poor, well, anything, they will make a cut out of it and take it for themselves. So it was really disgusting on the sense of the poor specifically, because there were like thousands of fucking cooperatives that were, put in the system, but obviously they all just, made up. They were just for laundering money. And this money obviously was from taxpayers. So this stuff that of the state trying to take care of you, no, it was just a scam. They were just using that as a shield for two reasons. One was to show to the people, yes, we're actually doing something good. And on the other side, you see this good thing that we're doing? Well, we need more taxpayers' money for putting money into this. But since Millet got into the way of of politics, explaining to people why we were in the situation we're in, we were, better said, and how we can fix it. And now he's proven that yeah, he was right. Well, we came out of that situation. That's pretty much it so far.
Would you necessarily
Someone else has arrived.
Would you necessarily say that there's parallels between the United States and Argentina? Because if I recall, Argentina was one of the wealthiest economies in the West outside the United States during the 20s.
Yes.
And they were affected heavily by the Great Depression in the United States, as well as the rest of the global economy. They didn't recover from that, correct? As far as I know.
No, we didn't. Well, the U.S. obviously had an economical bonanza. We didn't run with the same luck because there was something in the way that didn't allow us to improve our economy. Because yes, we were the wealthiest nation in the world at the time, like 1885 or something like that. I think it was that was the year that we have achieved that. But there was a lot of specifically in the 20th century, we had a lot of problems. One of them obviously was Peronism. The other one was the creation of the central bank. Because one thing that a lot of people didn't know before the arrival of Milei, he pointed it out that Argentina until 1935 or somewhere there, we didn't have a central bank. Argentina was the wealthiest country in the world, and we didn't even have a central bank. Well, he attacks the central bank as much as possible, like every time that he had the opportunity to. Well, the other reason, the worst part, I would say, that we couldn't go back and track with the economy that we used to have was we had six coup d'états in the country. Like we had a lot of dictatorships, and the worst one was the last one from 1976 to 1983. That was the bloodiest one. Like a lot of uh, people that were supposed to be communists, because the Red Scare at the time. People that were that were thought to be communists or suspected to be communists, or even neighbors, friends, or family members of communists, they were kidnapped. A lot of horrible stuff happened to them too. They were disappeared, and because of all of this political and humanitarian crisis turmoil, yeah, it destabilized the country, and somewhat we tried to go back to what we used to do in the 90s with this guy Menem as the president, but yeah, the 2001 crisis arrived, and it wasn't another hit for the economy, obviously, and in general for the society. So six dictatorships, the crisis of 2001, and left-wing governments since 2003 ended up making Argentina this mess of a this mess of economy of an economy that we had now, pretty much. What is you're trying to share something?
Let me stop that. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
I'm sorry. So the question I have is, you had mentioned before on our Telegram channel that the United States is the only country in the Americas that hasn't seen a coup. Is this correct?
Yes, outside of, well, also Canada, but yeah, the rest of Latin American countries at least had one dictatorship.
Okay. So that being said, do you think, like I said, because the reason why I'm asking you about Argentina is that comparably, in the 1920s, the United States and Argentina were very similar economically, and they were huge trade partners as well, along with the rest of the Americas. The question I have is, do you see the come to pass that this is going to be a norm in North America when the economy does crash? Could you see this being a possibility?
Yes, I do. One of the main reasons, and the most obvious one, is the elections that ended up giving the presidency to Joe Biden. Like, the guy is such a mess. The numbers of the U.S. are not good, and I don't like saying this, but yes, it seems that the U.S. is going to go through a lot of hard times when it comes to economy. If there is no one else that's going to, I don't know, save the U.S. politically, uh, I don't have much hopes for the U.S. when it comes to economy. So we have been there many times. We have defaulted or all debt too. We have been into 6 different dictatorships. We have been into a lot of crisis. We couldn't go back to the glorious days that we used to, you know, enjoy. So yes, historically, yes, based on the context that Argentina was going through and the context that is going the U.S. now through, yes, I do think that the U.S. is going to go through the same path if there is no one else that can save the U.S. politically.
See, I'm under the impression that we're going to hit a recession and eventually a Great Depression, a greater depression, worse than the 20s depression, the 30s.
Mm.
And I believe that regardless who is elected as president, rather it be Trump, rather it be Biden, Kamala Harris, or Gruesome Newsom, I believe this is coming regardless. And from the data analysis that I've done. And I've been pretty accurate with my data and the predictions and forecasts up until like the last 2 or 3 years. I called it 2019 that we were heading into a recession, and then they locked down the country under the guise of COVID in order to cover that recession and blame it on COVID lockdowns, which I think was politically it came as such a coincidence and such a guise that they were like, let's use that, and then we'll pretend like COVID lockdowns were the reason why our economy is failing, and then we'll get bailouts and we'll stimulate the economy again, and people will forget about it. Like create a crisis so that they can come as saviors. And this isn't a new concept, by the way. I mean, this has happened, in ancient world in Rome. The Roman Caesars would and the Senate would do this constantly with bread and circuses and whatnot. They would create a fake crisis, and then like for instance, they would hoard grain coming from Egypt and hide it, and then there'd be a famine or a potential famine, supply line shutdowns, and then the Caesar would come out and say, "I miraculously found a bunch of grain, and now it's bread and circuses for all. We're all happy and woo, great times, and hail Caesar, that sort of thing." And that's exactly what happened during COVID. People came out and they were like, "Hail Biden, the savior of," and he was, was it Fauci was getting the awards, and they were throwing out peace prizes and wonderful great times, and the bread and circuses went on, and this is what stimulated this zombie economy, as I call it, this fake economy where the government stimulated through quantitative easing before the 2008 crisis, another crisis that could have been avoided, but they wanted it to happen anyway because they either ignored it due to oversight or they allowed it and they didn't care. But it's the same thing with COVID. So it's just crisis after crisis after crisis. And we've seen this in history that countries that consistently go through crisis, or empires rather, that go through consistent crisis over a short period of time, ends up meeting their doom and they collapse ultimately. Every single empire in the history of the planet that has affordable amount of crises within a short period of time has eventually collapsed in a very short period of time. That being the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, the British, the British Empire, the Russian Empire with the Bolshevik revolutions, this sort of stuff. It all accumulated at the same, in the short period of time, a bunch of crises. So that being said, a new article came out today. That's what I was trying to share. I'm sorry. I'm going to present it. It was a Forbes article. I'm going to go ahead and share screen here if I can. And I'm window. There it is. So I'm going to share this article that came out. There we go. We'll present it. There we go. So the Dow. Whoop, I don't know what happened. There we go.
Yeah, now you can see it.
Okay, good. So the Dow surges to. I'm going to go ahead and share this the whole screen. That'll probably be better. If I can. There we go. So the Dow surges to a all-time high today. I don't want the photo. Dow surges to all-time high, passing 40,000 for the fourth time ever. Bread and circuses, everyone, free shit. We're all happy, yay! So it's an all-time high Friday, eclipsing the 40,000 mark for the fourth time in its 128-year history. Shares surge across several industries. Great times, and you have the key facts here and whatnot. But you can, I'll put a link, or there's a link to the to this article in the Straight Talk News channel. So if any of you guys, that link's in the description, by the way. So if you guys want to go read more about this article, you can go to the Straight Talk News channel on Telegram, and you can see it there. So the situation is that similar things happened like this in the past, like in the 20s, the roaring 20s, as they call it in the United States. And, stock market, all-time highs, like record-breaking times, And the thing about it is the depression, the collapse came shortly thereafter, the stock market crash, and they took us off gold standard and things like that, and World War II shortly thereafter. So I mean, it's like you said, the history it doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes, as one scholar once said. And we're in this pattern, this like 100-year cycle pattern of just consistent crisis and ups and downs and things of that nature. But at this point in time, the United States, like I said, I broke it down in a previous podcast that our current PPP ratio is, I think, 15%. It's about 15 or 18%. And during the 1920s, I think it was closer to 37%, something like that, or 50%, substantially higher. So when the United States collapsed, or had a depression and the market collapsed and all that happened, it was devastating to the global economy, as what happened in Argentina in the 1920s. So fast forward to 2008, to the 2008 crisis, the United States was, I think the GDP was at like 25% or 27%. PPP ratio was like around 19-20%. And it only affected certain regions of the planet. So it affected primarily regions like Europe and Middle East a little bit, and South America and so on. Any country that was connected to the derivatives, the CDOs and the derivatives market through the international banking, central banking, as you were describing it previously or earlier. So I mean, it was mitigated to that because I was in Asia at the time. I left and went to East Asia to work, and they said the economy wasn't really affected. Like I didn't even notice it. You usually could feel an economic downturn, and I didn't feel it, and I didn't notice it. And the people were like, "Yeah, we're fine. There's no economic issue." However, countries like Iceland, for instance, have destroyed their economy. They had protests, they removed government officials, they arrested people, heads rolled, and so on and so forth. The United States, nothing happened. No one went to jail, except for maybe Bernie Madoff, because the amount of corruption, and fraud that he had committed over the course of like 30 years that, again, the government just set a blind eye to because he was connected to so many high level trading firms. And I believe he started the NASDAQ, something like that. So it's literally just bread and circuses and a zombie economy, if you will. And that being said, the parallels, like I said, like I definitely see. I believe we're in recession now. Obviously, the unemployment levels have ticked up a little bit, and they're posted in the live tick at the bottom of the screen. Inflation has remained above 3%. It's gone down a little bit, but like I said, the unemployment rate went up, and that's generally an indication when consumer prices go down and employment go up. That's usually a good indication that we're in recession. But officially, what an official recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP growth. So we had that before. I believe it was in 2000. I want to say it was in 2022 or 2023. We had 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. That was under the Biden administration. And the Fed and the government was like, yeah, well, we're not in recession. Like that's they redefine the terms of what recession is. Because they're fudging the numbers, and it's bread and circuses, and like I said, it's a zombie economy. So up is down, down is up, and it's literally just it's clown show type stuff, and that's more to come. Like I said, because it's like was it Baghdad Bob or whatever? It's like nothing to see here. Don't look behind the curtain. Like Wizard of Oz type stuff, and that's what you're going to see more of. I mean, you're especially like I said, the if you saw the presidential debates, you noticed that like Biden and Trump were blaming each other for the economy, and you destroyed the economy, and no, I had the best economy. You could look at the numbers, and then Biden was like, he's like, now look at your economy, and you destroyed the economy, and he's like, no, I created Biden economics, and I had the greatest economy. What are you talking about? It's just like it's hilarious, and at the same time, it's sad and tragic. Because so many people's lives are going to be affected by a major collapse and depression. And like I said, coup d'etats will come. What I mean? That's inevitable when you have a massive catastrophic collapse of a financial system, and people no longer believe in the system, and they're going to start pointing fingers. First off at immigrants, illegal immigrants, then they're going to be pointing fingers at conservatives, and they're going to be pointing fingers at Democrats and liberals and progressives, and people will be pointing fingers at each other. And that's when the chaos starts. And that's when you have coups. You have political leadership, and you have, military that are sitting in the shadows, leaders, and they will come about. They will come about in times of despair and economic decline, as you explained in Argentina over the last 50, 60 years. So, I mean, I think that's things to come. That's what I'm predicting. That's why I'm trying to leave the country. I don't want to stay here much longer I don't want to be here past the elections, because I think 2025, as I predicted in 2014 in a published article, that I believe the United States will collapse, and economically there'll be an economic collapse or major depression in 2025, along with China, CCP China. The communist government in China will collapse because their largest trading partner is the United States. They're dependent on consumer goods and supply lines to the United States. They even send food to the United States, by the way. A lot of people don't know that, but they send food. The United States buys food made in China. Same with Mexico. They buy food made in Mexico. I think Trump was the first political leader to actually point that out with Nabisco, which are made in Mexico and sent to the United States. I'm not going to buy another Oreo, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, the thing is like more and more food, less and less food is being manufactured in the United States, and more food is being imported because of the cost associated with producing that food, and the cost of importing is much cheaper. But that's going to be shutting down, because if the dollar weakens, there will be less buying power with the PPP, and inevitably we know what's going to happen: starvation, famines, and civil unrest. I don't, would you like to add anything?
Well, isn't that what they want? Like weaken the U.S. dollar. Like I have noticed this before about my country that politicians here, specifically the big name of Massa, this guy that was the Minister of Economy, uh, they were trying to make us poor, so it was easier for us to be controlled by them. Obviously, like it is not the same someone that has a house, a family, a wife, children, a stable job, or even better, many sources of money. Someone with an education, or someone with studies in several fields, someone that can is really reliable, someone that actually has a good life, than someone that is in poverty, lives in, I don't know, in a big slum, lives with people who are uneducated criminals or just straight up murderers, or doesn't even have like a stable job. Like, yeah, it is way easier to control someone like that than the person that you have mentioned first. Um, this example that you have said of wine and bread. I remember that.
Yeah, bread circuses. Yeah, bread
Yes,
circuses. Yep.
yes. That I remember making the link of it when the COVID stuff. Here it was said that yes, the government will make a quarantine of, just don't worry about it, like 2 months or something. And then it was 3 months, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, and so on and so on. Argentina ended up being the country that had the longest quarantine in the world, literally, and it didn't even do anything. There were people that died because of the disease, while the quarantine was still on. Like, I don't know how you end up committing such a thing of actually trying to get people not the disease, but still you have thousands of people dying. And in front of the pink house where the president works, there in the statue of San Martin, which is the founding father of the nation, there are a lot of rocks. These rocks have the name of the people, obviously, that passed away due to COVID, and this is a protest that is still there. Those rocks are still there, and I don't think no one's going to take him away like anytime soon. It's a scar for the nation, so yeah, I don't think it's going to be taken out ever. But yeah, basically, adelante. Basically, they, what was I saying? Someone was talking to me. Yes, this thing that you have said of
Bread circuses.
oh yes, yes, of them using this as an excuse of saying why the economy is going bad. Yeah, it didn't work out for them because Millet ended up saying no. The economy is not wrong. It's not wrong. It's not bad because of the disease or anything. It is because of the policies you're following, the policies you're putting into us, all the taxes. Did you know that Argentina had like 214 taxes, something like that? Like,
Yeah, it's probably about as much as America had. We're the most heavily taxed country in the world, just about. I mean, we pay taxes on everything. Anything that the government can tax in the United States, they will tax. And when they do, they'll do these like tax breaks, like where, like in Florida, DeSantis will do like a week's worth of tax breaks for like buying school supplies and things of that nature. And it's like, again, bread and circuses. It's like, oh, go buy your school supplies and stuff like this. But it's like, well, the thing is that isn't the government public schools supposed to be providing that? You know what I mean? Like, is it really Yeah, is it literally a break? Why am I paying for school supplies? I pay that through taxes. Why the hell am I going to pay for it? You're to give me a tax break to go buy stuff that should be already provided.
Hmm. What was I going to say? Yes, the last government was a disaster, a really horrible one. It's even regarded by a lot of fellow citizens of here. Obviously, me too. Regarded as the worst president in Argentina's history. Alberto Fernandez. So yeah, Argentina had 214 taxes, and it seems that Milei is trying to give like an example of what's to be done outside of helping people, because of course he's actually helping, taking taxes out, um, trying to educate people in finances and economies so they can personally grow, try to there is also one thing that a lot of people were criticizing about Milei is like, why are we paying with our taxpayers' money? Why are we paying with our taxes for him to go to all of these places, to Europe, the US, Australia? Well, the reason why he's doing that is that he's trying to sell Argentina as a good place to go invest. All of these big companies like Microsoft, Sony, I don't know, Tesla, Google, all these companies. He's trying to go to these places and speak specifically with the owners, the CEOs of these companies, telling them, hey, this place has a lot of land that you can buy. We have really few taxes, and we have a lot of people that are really interested and prepared to work with you. So, if you want, you can invest in my country, and you will have a lot of profit out of it. That's what he's trying to do, pretty much. But yeah, what he's doing is just like Bukele, the president of El Salvador, when it comes to safety, security, like all he did was just imprison them all. As a good example. So what Milei is doing is what Bukele is doing to security in economy, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, basically, to stimulate the economy, you have to lower taxes, you have to keep inflation in check, and encourage investment, foreign investment. That's like the Republic of Georgia, for instance, under Saakashvili. One of the first things that he did is similar to Melee. He went ahead and drained the swamp, so to speak. He shut down a lot of unnecessary parts of the government or offices in the government that were just
Yes. Yes, the famous videos of him saying "afuera." Yeah, that one.
afraid.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's exactly what Saakashvili did 10 years before, 10, 15 years, or about 10 years before Melee did the same thing. And it worked
Mm.
in Georgia. Shortly after Saakashvili, rebuilt the country, signed a new constitution that was more in favor of small business growth and foreign investment, and gave more rights back to the people. It lowered taxes to a 15%
Mhm.
flat rate. That's written in the Constitution, where taxes can't actually be enacted unless by an act by the people. The people have to allow the taxation increase or new taxes to be imposed. Kind of an
Mhm.
interesting progressive idea, yeah. But yeah, they saw 10% GDP growth year to year shortly thereafter for like a decade,
Wow,
and
that's really
yeah, and they went
fast.
from yes, and they went from one of the poorest countries in Europe, poorer than Ukraine, to
Mm.
now they're in the top five of ease to do business in the world. They're up. They're ranked
Nice.
above the United. They're ranked above the United States, by the way, in ease to do business.
Wow, that's really amazing. Yes. The other thing that Milei has been doing is taking care of inflation. And one thing that a lot of people are also criticizing about him is that he's printing money, but not in the same way as the last government was doing it. Well, the last government was printing a lot of really small bills, so not to show that inflation was actually a problem. There was the 500 peso bill, there was the 1,000 one. and that's it. The highest bill there ever was, at least in the last government in 2023, was the 1,000 one. Well, now we have the 10,000 one, and it's expected to arrive in October or November. The one that is $20,000 bills. Well, to give you an idea how much that is, 10,000 Argentine pesos now, it will be $10, literally. Imagine that you want to buy an iPhone that how much would it be now? $500, right? I'm not sure. Well,
Yeah, it depends on what kind of iPhone. The newest iPhone, I think I can look it up, but I think it's probably around 1,200, maybe US, and give or take.
well,
But go
just
ahead.
to just to give you an example, well, instead of paying $1,200, you end up paying, I don't know, $1 million for one iPhone. That's pretty much how bad it is. Like there are prices like candy. Can you imagine buying candy? I don't know, a bag of candy for 500 Argentine for $500. That's how bad the situation is. But it has been
That
rapidly
reminds me
going
of
down. Huh?
Yeah, that reminds me of Back to the Future when Doc gave Marty he's like go buy a Pepsi, and I think he gave him like a 20 or something to go buy a Pepsi to
Hmm.
demonstrate the rate of inflation in the United States in the future, and it was like they left 85 or something like that and went into 2015. And at that rate
Hmm.
of inflation, like that, that's like hyperinflation almost,
Oh
For,
Lord.
so yeah, and they point that out in Back to the Future. It was kind of
Mm.
interesting.
How much was the Pepsi?
Well, he gave him a $20 bill, so I imagine it was probably like $19 or something close to
Oh, $19 for a can of Pepsi. Dear Lord.
that.
Uh, what were the numbers now that I can remember? How to tell you? Well, because of the context that I was given, because of the elections, Argentina had 60% per month inflation, but Milei ended up winning. So first we had 60. It ended up going down to 25 in December. Like the elections were done in November, and oh Lord, the elections were done in November. Milei ended up winning in December, and in the same month of December, it ended up going from 60% to 25. In January, from 25 to how much it was? I think it was 17 or something. It was a long time ago, fucking a lot of months, so I forgot. Well, currently the inflation rate per month is 4% and still going down, which is really fast.
What's the
So
interest rate in Argentina, by the way? Because our current interest rate, I think, is at 6%, 7%, something like that. Might be higher, might be
uh,
lower.
I forgot, but because of the numbers that Milei is giving, the banks and the economy as a whole giving a good are giving good faith in Milei's work. They're backing him up. And one of the things is that banks are once again giving away mortgages for people to buy houses. Like that hasn't been done since 2003, I think. I'm not sure. But it's amazing that we're finally once again able to afford, well, not afford, to have money to buy houses. Like, dear Lord, I was talking to a bunch of people from Spain, and they were saying, "Oh yes, how grateful you are to be late to have a house, dude. You're in Europe. You have an idea what it is to be here." And not being able to buy a house in your whole life, it doesn't matter how far you made it into any kind of career. Dear Lord.
And that's interesting you brought that up because the home affordability is a current issue in the United States today. As you
Yes,
know,
I know.
I live in Florida currently,
Mm.
and Florida has seen the highest rise in housing prices, especially in the Miami-Dade area. And it got to the point where the prices have gotten so expensive and the rents have gone up so much in Florida that people are leaving Miami and moving further inland to smaller communities and rising the prices artificially in those areas as well as
the famous gentrification, right?
Exactly. So, in these rural farm towns, there's no jobs. There's literally no jobs. There's no employment outside of agriculture and maybe medical because they're retirement communities. So you have a lot of people sold their homes in Miami and Tampa and like Orlando, and they moved here in Central Florida, and they have no jobs. Because there's most of the jobs. It's a seasonal type community. So 6 months out of the year, like right now during the summer, there's no business, there's no commerce because a lot of the money that comes down is usually coming from
farming land
that live here seasonally. Yeah, they live here seasonally during the winter. And they're building everywhere. They're building homes everywhere, and there's lots of building projects going in, but they're not putting in, these 400,000, these single family homes. They're putting in trailers. They're putting in, smaller homes and things of that nature, more efficient type things, because this is for retirees that can come down here. But the average home value for these like manufactured homes is like
retirees,
200 or 300. Retirees.
Boomers.
Boomers, pensioners.
Oh man.
so the average manufactured home they're putting in is like it's priced around $300,000. You know what I mean? And that's like if you go back pre-COVID, like that was you could have bought in this area. You could have bought like a 3,000 square foot home. You could have bought like a huge multifamily home for that price. And those homes that were selling for $250,000 to $300,000 are now selling to like $600,000 now here to $1 million. Like they jumped that much. They doubled and tripled in value. And the inland, and where there's no jobs, there's no commerce. In Miami, it's gone up even higher. I mean, you had it's ludicrous. You can go to like the ghetto of Miami, and a home that was selling for $100,000 is now selling for $500,000 or $600,000 in Miami-Dade. I mean, it's ludicrous.
Well, that's in the U.S., but what about Mexico and their famous case of people from California going down to Mexico because it's way cheaper? And what do they end up causing? They end up causing this gentrification. They're literally people from Mexico. They do not want to sell anything to other Mexicans because it is way better for them, obviously economically. That's the main point, obviously, to sell to people from California than to actual Mexicans from Mexico, their own kind, just because all of these people from California are moving there. And this has what?
Yeah, and that being said, they're moving there because of the remote jobs that occurred during the during COVID. So they would relocate to Mexico and still work their remote job from Mexico. And now that they're having to go back to the U.S. to go work, what's going to happen to those properties? Are they going to abandon them? Are they going to take a loss? Are they going to sell them? Are they going to run them out? You know what I mean? So that's going to destroy the local economy. That's what's happening here in Florida, because there's no commerce, there's no jobs, there's no economic growth. It's a zombie economy, as I said, and as the podcast title.
You're not producing anything, yet you keep get money out of it.
Yeah, so basically the only thing they're producing is debt and inflation. So they're overinflating the homes, and it's creating a fake economy. And DeSantis is like, "Oh, best economy in the world. We have a surplus tax revenue." And it's like, well, yeah, because when you have a house that was worth $100,000 selling for $500,000, the property taxes increase, tenfold on that. And then on top of that, local communities, because they got greedy, because governments are greedy, they increased the tax percentage. So like not only are you paying more because you bought the home for more than it was worth, but your tax increased. And then on top of that, the insurance premiums on the house went up. They went up because the cost of the home was much more substantial. The cost of the home skyrocketed. But on top of that, the insurance companies have doubled and tripled the price for coverage out of greed a lot of times. And that means a lot of people in Florida are buying these like $500,000 homes, and they're going uninsured because carriers won't cover them, because the home they know the home is not worth that. It's not insurable for that. or they just can't, they can't afford the coverage because it's too much. They bought the home with an expectation of paying the realtor was like, well, this is what the current taxes are. This is what the current insurance rate is. Not knowing that when they bought the home, they would do a new tax assessment and they would, the taxes tripled or quadrupled. And the same thing with the insurance. So now you have a person that's house poor and they can't afford the home that they just bought. They relocated. And now that they're asking them to go back to work, because a lot of these people came from lockdown states that were in lockdown, like New York and California and so on and so forth. And now that these companies are telling them to come back or you lose your job, they're like, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe I can find a job locally. They're like, don't worry about it. I'll go find a job here. And they get out in the job market, they realize there's no jobs and the salaries are extremely low. I mean, I'll give you a statistic, and I think I mentioned this before in a previous podcast, that I believe the current median income in Florida is right around $38,000 a year. And the average cost of living, it's around $46,000 a year. Does that make sense?
Quite a gap,
yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah, so like literally the average person in Florida is living not paycheck to paycheck, but they're living debt to debt, the zombie economy.
Oh. Dear Lord, dude. Haven't they thought about this? Like when it comes to buying a house, like, or buying property to build a house, like, what did you think about before it's like, in the case that I get stuck in the middle of nowhere in this place that I just bought, and what should I do outside of, well, what should I do in the case that I lose my job? What else can I do there? Like, I'm moving far away where my family's really far away too, just because of the prices of housing being really cheap. So, what do they have thought about this before? I would have.
I mean, that's the second part of the zombie economy is that people are brain dead. They all share the same brains. So they come down here and they buy off of emotion other than logic and common sense. And they think, oh, well, real estate always goes up, because that's the boomer mentality, of course. And they buy these overpriced homes thinking that they're going to be able to sell them if they need to, in case if they've got to leave or relocate or they don't like it. And come to find out that they're house poor, which house poor means that basically they owe more on the loan than they have equity in the home. And they're stuck. And they can't refinance because they're like, the realtor's like, well, interest rates are going to come down. They always come down. And they're like, okay, I guess I can refinance later, to get the payment down in case if I get stuck, right? And no, the interest rates have gone up since they bought the home.
Yeah,
so
I looked it up.
Yeah.
I have looked it up. The interest rate of Argentina here. It says Argentina's central bank decreased the annual nominal benchmark interest rate to 50% on Thursday. But here now it says that yesterday the interest rate was 40%. That's pretty much it.
That's crazy. 40% interest rate. I think the interest rate in Georgia, Republic of Georgia, is right around, it's above 10%. It's come down, actually. They brought the interest rates down recently. And I think that was a result of stimulating the economy, because probably most likely because the global economy has been in recession since COVID, and some places haven't actually recovered. So that's basically what I've been saying, is that it's a fake economy. It's a zombie economy. The only country that's showing positive results is like the United States. At this point, they're showing that the economy is healthy. There's jobs, there's low unemployment. Although interest rates are high comparably seasonally to what they were before at 0% or negative interest rates, literally, like Japan. That there's everything's fine here, guys. Everything's great. Nothing to worry about.
I'm really glad that the interest rates are going down finally.
Yeah, I mean, when interest rates are above 10%, that's them coming down is it's not necessarily a bad or negative connotation to the economy, the overall economy. But when you have interest rates below 10% and you have an inflation rate over 3%, and you're deciding to bring interest rates down because you have to stimulate the economy and QE, quantitative easing, that means your economy is done. You're bankrupt, more or less. And that's what we're going to be seeing in the United States, is a bankrupt zombie economy. And I mean, the thing is with the stock market, I've mentioned many times in the channel that the stock market is fake. It's a zombie stock market. It's stagnant. It goes up. It has these record numbers. Then it goes down. There's no real ups and downs. It's just stagnant. And the reason why that is,
the numbers doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything because the 40. I think it's like 70% of the stock market is basically BlackRock, pensions, state pensions, 401ks, Vanguard. Yeah, these big investment firms that caused the 2008 financial collapse. They're heavily invested in the market, and then you have mom and pop boomers that basically are like, what's a safe bet because it always goes up, right? So they've got their pensions, they've got their 401ks, state pensions are invested in BlackRock and these different mutual funds, and they're keeping it afloat. They're keeping the stock market afloat and the zombie economy because they have nothing else to put it into because they could put it in real estate futures, but I mean at the same time they already do, but at the same time, like I said, it's when the boomers start feeling the pinch, like what's going on now that I predicted 2 years ago on the channel, you're going to see boomers start asking to liquidate their 401ks, and that's when the collapse is going to happen. That's going to happen very soon because although inflation, the official inflation rates is below 3% now, apparently, as in the ticker. It's probably not. I mean, we know, when you were buying beef at like $3-4 a pound pre-COVID, and now it's selling, ground beef is selling for $6 or $7 a pound 2 or 3 years later. That's not 3% annual inflation. That's 100% inflation. That's hyperinflation. I mean, that's and they said, oh, it's transitory, which means that it's only temporary, and that it's just because of COVID and the supply lines, and it'll come down when we get more supply. Well, the supply has been the supply lines is full. Like we have enough supply coming in foreignly because we're investing overseas and we're bringing food from overseas. So we have even more food than we had pre-COVID because we're buying cheap food from overseas at a cheaper price. Yet the prices are still high. It's like, are you kidding me?
Oh,
like
just like the case of the pears, the famous case of the pears of when you look up one of these Dole, the company Dole, this company that's known for bananas and stuff. Well,
you're talking about the banana republics with the banana wars down in South America. The CIA.
Yeah, that thing. But I mean, on the part of the package, when you look up the package of these pears, you look it up, and it says grown in Argentina and packaged in Thailand. When you look it up, what you will think that's a really unreliable way of packaging pears, but if you look up how the whole process is, then it makes sense.
Yeah, how the hell does that make sense? Thailand and Argentina are on the other side of the planet. So that means that they're producing it in Argentina, and they're shipping it to Thailand, and then they're shipping it back to the United States. How the hell does that work? Where's the math in that?
Well, I remember that I have found like a video on YouTube that literally the name is grown in Argentina, packaged in Thailand, and he explains that the pears in Argentina are a better quality, so that's why Dole buys them from us. Then, because of how pears grow, they take their time. So instead of waiting the time that they need to wait for them to be packaged, they just send them to this specific part of the world, which is Thailand, which is the cheapest place that you can, make the whole package process because of how cheap it is. And from Thailand, it goes the other way around Like instead of going through the Atlantic, it goes through the Pacific, and then it arrives to the U.S. That's pretty much the whole process that I remember because I watched the video long ago. But
Yeah.
that's pretty much it. But yeah, the Dolly company, it's the same company that was behind the banana republics in the in the last century.
Right. So
Uh,
also coffee comes from South America, and that leads me to our plug here. 1775 Coffee, our sponsor of the channel today. And we're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to go ahead and play the ad.
It's time
Nice.
to say goodbye to Starbucks and say hello to Rumble's 1775 coffee. Unlike other woke brands, this is a coffee that backs free speech and is unapologetic about it. Visit 1775coffee.com, use the promo code STUDIO40 to get 40% off any subscription. The coffee comes in medium and dark roast. It also comes in pea berry, which is similar to Kona coffee. In other words, this stuff is premium. Click the link in the live chat or the description. You can also go directly to 1775coffee.com and use the promo code STUDIO40 to get 40% off today.
Right on. Yeah, 1775 Coffee. It's good stuff, man. Link is in the description, and it's in the ticker as well as in the live chat. So anyway, we were talking about South America, Banana Republic, and that being said, I think the United States is currently quickly becoming a banana republic because I'm starting to see third world, because I've been in the third world. Like I said, I've worked overseas for over a decade, teaching overseas in different areas like Turkey, Georgia, China, Korea, Saudi Arabia, Central Europe, and all over.
Can China be classified as that? Aren't they
China,
like?
they're developing economy still. They're technically developing economy. They're not necessarily third world. The only third world
Oh.
country I've been is probably Georgia was technically transitioning from a third world into a developing economy, and I was there when it was in its process of developing. I came shortly after Saakashvili took over. I came shortly after the Russian Ossetia conflict in 2008, after the recession. So they did see some economic fallout from that, but they quickly recovered. And yeah, now it's I wouldn't say it's at first world standards, but it is quickly getting there. It's definitely a developing economy. It's a strong developing economy. And when you look at per capita compared to China and other places, it's definitely a lot more developed. But that being said, like I said, I noticed, like I said, when I first arrived in Georgia, for instance, Republic of Georgia, as they were developing the economy, I noticed certain types of social order and how things were and how difficult it was to get certain things and supply line issues, and you can only get one of one thing, and there was no, it wasn't like going to the American, to like Walmart or something like that, where you had like 10 different varieties of something. You only had one option or two options, and that was it. You had Coke or Pepsi, basically. And now I go to the store. Last time I was there, which a couple of years ago before COVID, and they had multiple different variations of different, they were having stuff coming in from Germany, from Russia, from Turkey, from everywhere, and also domestically from Georgia as well. And yeah, you had options, and then on top of that, it was easy to ship stuff through Amazon over there through a freight forwarding service. So I mean, you can pretty much get anything you wanted, and very affordably for the most part. But just certain things like just power brownouts and power outages and water going out for like a day, or like power going out for 2 days because the infrastructure wasn't modernized. It was the same infrastructure they had in the 90s during the Soviet era, and elevators not working because they were built in the Soviet period and they weren't maintained. Shit like that, you know what I mean? Like stuff that received a lot of neglect because it just wasn't the money, because the economy was in third world conditions. And just how the people drive and the people were they were miserable because of the economy. There's just no jobs. People were trying to leave and they were relocating and coming and going and sending money back. Well, nonetheless, I see a lot of similarities and parallels with the United States and Georgia that I saw there. And in Turkey as well, in Eastern Turkey, which is less developed than Western Turkey, obviously the European side versus the Asian side. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's very noticeable now in the U.S. And I don't know if because Americans that are lived here, born here, they're it's like a frog in a boiling pot. You know what I mean? If you put them in,
I know that. I know
that concept.
the frog.
You gradually.
If you put a frog inside of a boiling water ball, it will jump out. But if you heat it up,
gradually,
yeah,
it'll die. It'll just
exactly.
Blow itself. So that's the thing I noticed here, and like I said, it's that zombie economy where everybody shares the same brain and the same propaganda and bullshit, and they just basically just
same products.
Well, the government says this, the government says this, and DeSantis says this, and Biden and Trump says this, and everything's great from what I understand. The media, CNN and Fox News, they say this and that great things to come and shit like that. So. They really don't realize that, and the 10-year just in the 10-year period, the decline that has happened socially, economically, politically. I mean, you're going to have a convicted felon running for president on a big party ticket, first time in U.S. history. That's banana republic style fucking government, man.
Literally it is.
Literally. I mean, I didn't even see that in Georgia. I didn't see that in Georgia. Political opponents being persecuted and sued and threatened to jail time, and I really didn't see that in I saw it in developing economies, but I didn't see it at the extent that the magnitude that I've seen it in the States currently in this time period, in this current time. This is a third world country. It's quickly becoming a third world country, and a lot of it is just it's that zombie mentality, the people have become lazy, content. They've no work ethic. They don't care because they're horribly underpaid. The cost of living is tripled in price in the last 5 years or last decade. It's quadrupled if you really want to go back far enough, since 2008. And homes aren't affordable. People have huge amounts of debts from student loans, from car loans. Cars are costing $60,000, $70,000, upwards of $100,000.
Education, dude. Education was such a scam. Do you have any idea of how many traps were there for you to get in debt for? Dude, I'm gonna go and have some journalism studies course in this really prestigious university. I'm gonna have a lot of money out of it. Dear Lord, dude, what a scam! Now all of these people don't even have the money to pay back the debt that you got for having these studies.
Yeah, and then now it's bailout time. Now it's socialization. It's socialism, and I mean, this is stuff I see in third world countries, and not necessarily, communist or like fascist third world countries. This is what I see in developing economies.
Meaning?
Yeah, kind of like countries that were like France or I'll give you Portugal or Greece that were very economically viable country. And now they're basically in a zombie. They've been in a zombie economy for a decade or more, and Germany keeps bailing them out with the euro.
France is going through a disaster when it comes to the social part too.
Right. So the like I said, it's the zombie economy has started in Europe, and then it's now come to the United States. You know what I mean? And this is the transition from an industrial to a post-industrial to a third world type condition. And really, I'm using the word third world incorrectly, because the third world means, third world was originally intended to describe the axis of evil during World War II. So you had countries that supported the West, and then you had the third world is what it was described as.
Yeah,
Really,
those
what we
that
need, what
supported
we
the first world, those that supported the West, the second world, those that supported the USSR and satellite countries, and the third world, which was people who didn't go for any of these two, pretty much.
exactly. So that being said, like it's just that this is a failed economy. It's a failed
Mm.
country. And Europe, Western Europe and Central Europe are failed economies and failed countries. The social experiment has failed,
Yeah.
and quickly. And like I said, generally when an empire fails, when an empire collapses, like the Soviet Union, for instance, is a great example because it's the most recent powerful industrialized country that has collapsed in our lifetime that people can remember because it didn't happen that long ago. It happened in 91.
1991, yeah. There are
Right.
people
So
who are
there's
still
people
alive who were there.
exactly. So there's people still alive that have seen it, and there are people that lived in the Soviet Union that are now living in the United States that left either before or after the collapse. And these
Mm.
people individually, these Soviet people that I know personally, and other people from our channel that know people that have talked to people from the post-Soviet Union, have said that they see much similarities from the collapse of the Soviet Union as the current state of affairs in the United States, and that some have even suggested possibly they're going to relocate back to their post-Soviet country because they are worried about the stability of the West and the United States in general.
Oh,
So that's generally what happens when your economy and your social structure and your government is unstable and your currency is unstable. As the first people to leave are the immigrants. We saw this in '08. We saw this in '08 with the Mexican immigrants that they couldn't find work. They shut down. Immigrants
work
that
or
were on
house.
work visas. Yeah, they were on work visas. They just went back to Mexico because the economy was more stable there because it wasn't connected economically like Iceland, for instance. You know what I mean? So there were still jobs. I see people were going back to Korea because, like I said, I was there and the economy was stable. It wasn't really as affected because that was a banking collapse. That wasn't necessarily a global depression or that sort of thing. It was because of the banking system was corrupt and it collapsed. So, like I said, Mexico wasn't that affected. They were still producing agricultural goods and consumer goods, and they were still selling it. It's just at a lower number or percentage than they were previously, But I mean, at the same time, like I said, it comes down to this time around, the United States doesn't produce anything. It's a post-industrial country. It's a service-based economy. So the global economy is not going to be affected as it was during the '08 recession. The only thing that's going to be affected are the banks and the central banks that are connected to the United States and those that use the dollar as reserve currency. So countries that you see that are dumping the
What a
dollar
coincidence!
currently.
What a coincidence that my country is going to get rid of its own central bank.
Exactly. They're getting rid of their central bank because they don't want to have the fallout from a U.S. dollar collapse and a U.S. central banking system collapse because they're all connected to the central banking system. So that's why you're seeing Russia, you're seeing China. And China, it's a little too late because they have their own internal issues because they don't have any real resources. They just produce, they just produce things. So they're dependent on resource-rich countries like Russia or oceanic like Australia or Southeast Asia or the United States for the raw resources, Brazil, Argentina, this sort of thing. So they're a little bit different situation. That's why I said they're going to collapse economically with the United States because their currency, their secondary currency, they have the most amount of U.S. dollars in their secondary currency and debt out of the world. Japan as well. We see Japan. I think Japan is going to be horribly affected by a U.S. collapse economically and a dollar collapse. But like I said, you will see, like I said, like Georgia right now is the state where they're like, I don't know if we really feel confident in the U.S. dollar anymore, and if we really feel confident as an ally with the United States, and that's why you're seeing this political whack-a-mole, like tug of war type thing going on there currently, because Georgia's economy is fairly stable, and their currency is actually backed by kind of oil and the people are very educated and industrialized. So, it's a different country than it was 10 years ago because the new generation speaks English fluently. They speak it better than Americans. And they're educated as well. And they have money now because money has come into the country. So, and they've worked overseas and they brought that money back to Georgia to invest in the country. So, and like I said, the currency has stayed at 3 lira to $1 for over a decade now. They haven't really seen much inflation. If they have any inflation, it's at less than 1%. At most, so that's what I predict too. Is I see the trend that basically you're going to see a lot of these smaller countries, medium-sized countries, and even industrialized countries like Russia, for instance, where they're going to start ditching their dollar reserves, and they're going to start basically looking at their central banking system and see how exposed they are to the U.S. Banking, to the international IMF and U.S. central banking scheme. That's what I think is going on now. That's what we call a currency war. We have trade wars and currency wars, and this is what we had in World War I, leading up to World War II. We led up to World War I and then World War II, and that's where that third world, first world type saying comes from. And we're seeing that history repeat itself again 100 years later. A lot of it's, like I said, it's dealing with currency, central banking schemes, and all the above. Because we went from a gold standard to a fiat currency. In that time, and now we're going from a fiat currency to a commodity-based currency. That's what I see as a current trend. Is countries with high-end commodities like Russia, like Australia, Germany, even to an extent, they have huge amounts of commodities that are easily accessible, and they have the industrial output to produce those and sell those on the open marketplace. Their currencies will become more stable, like you see in the GCC, for instance, with Saudi Arabia, with Qatar and UAE and Kuwait. That they have a huge amount of oil reserves, so their economies remain stable, even though they're a socialist system. They're a kingdom or a feudal system that is a socialist-based system at its base economically. They're still able to remain stable even during this time. And they were stable during the recession as well, because I worked in Saudi Arabia during the recession. They didn't see any economic impact on it, other than because the oil prices, of course, stayed. They didn't drop. They stayed pretty stable during the recession, because they were still, like I said, it was a banking collapse. It wasn't a economic collapse. So countries like Korea and other places were still using oil, and they were still purchasing oil, keeping the oil market stable. That's what I see from the data analysis of the situation. But this time around, I do see oil stabilizing. I don't see oil going over $100 a barrel ever again. I don't ever see it going over, because if oil was going to go over $100 a barrel currently, it would have happened when the Gaza-Israeli conflict. It would have happened then, and it didn't. It did happen during the Ukraine crisis, the Ukraine-Russian war, and then it went back. It stabilized shortly thereafter, but because it didn't go over $100 a barrel during the Israeli conflict, where most of the oil that, because that war is basically over oil rights and off the Gaza coast. That's basically why that oil is there. The Saudi Arabia is proposing a pipeline to go through the country and to Turkey and to Europe to bypass Russia's oil and gas, LNG. I said it on the podcast previously on the channel, and that's basically what it's about. It's about oil and commodities and trade. That's what that war is all about, Gaza conflict. And of course, the Israel being greedy and wanted to take whatever resources that the Gazans or the Palestinians claim as theirs, that technically is theirs. They're like, this is ours, goodbye, bye, because they won't even let them out. They won't let them seafare more than a mile off the coast for a reason, because they don't want them claiming the oil or causing sabotage or anything of that nature. So anyway, that being said, like I said, the commodities market definitely, I think, will stabilize, and you'll see emerging markets. And then it'll get to a point where the U.S. won't be able to extract they won't be able to sell their commodities, because there's a brain drain, zombie economy, brains, So like the average person has their gender studies degree, as you eloquently pointed out, and they don't have a degree in petroleum engineering, which because of the climate change crisis and all this fiasco, they started shutting down petroleum engineering schools and schools for people to obtain these type of trades. So they're going to have difficulty extracting oil by shut down the Keystone pipeline. So there's less and less people that are skilled and educated to be able to get these commodities out of the ground and to extract and transport them. On top of that, nobody goes and trades anymore. They want to become TikTokers, and they want to, like I said, they want to be the businessman.
More stuff that doesn't actually produce anything of value. Just
exactly.
And entertainment is good, but not of the size of that anyone can be like famous and have a lot of money out of it.
I still be an influencer, man. Shit, you know what I mean?
Literally.
That's how it is. That mentality, the zombie mentality. You know what I mean? So, it's done. There is nothing. America's going to be like how Russia has been post-Soviet Union. It's going to have a lot of commodities sitting in the ground in an area where they didn't build the infrastructure during the Soviet period because they were extracting oil and
no
other
infrastructure,
resources.
no people educated with the skills needed to take the resources out and make money out of it.
Exactly. So that's what I see. That's why I say it's going to collapse. And it's the same in China because China, they're factory workers. You don't have petroleum engineers in China. I mean, you probably have a few, but you don't have like people that are highly skilled in petroleum engineering in massive amounts. You don't see a lot of engineers and like architects that are like cutting edge and like the greatest architects in history or anything like that. They're all from Germany and like other countries, where they have the programs and they have the techniques and technology and history of that. China is an industrialized state, but it just produces like cheap products and like stuff that really is just go away.
Cheap plastic toys.
Candy and dog food and doormats and knickknacks and things like that. It's like how Japan was during pre-World War II. They were producing a lot of the consumer goods for America from the cheap pot metal and different resources that we were sending there. The cheap raw resources we were sending to Japan.
Oh,
but Japan
just like in the movie that you mentioned, Back to the Future. That he was told, no, the dog said, "Oh, it must be Japanese." I have talking about his car. And
it's crap. It's like all the best stuff comes from Japan.
Yeah, exactly. Then Marty says that exactly.
But the difference between Japan is like they were very smart people and they were an empire before they were defeated by the American Empire, and they still had an industrialness to them. I mean, they were for the longest time they produced some of the best cars in the world during the 80s and 90s, as you said, like in the Back to the Future movie. I think that was in Back to the Future 3 when they went back into the Wild West. But I mean, basically they had the work power, they had the educated workforce. It's just that they just were defeated and all of that, but they rebound like quickly within a generation. China never had that. They didn't have that for a long time. You have to go back to like ancient world for them to have that type of industrialness, education and stuff. I mean, a lot of the Chinese that they send overseas to get educated and skilled, they don't come back. They just want to stay in the country they went to. You know what I mean? That's got to tell you something, And then like the billionaires and the very wealthy people, they're trying to leave because they can't invest in anything in the country. They have to go to other countries to invest, to make their money, because you can only invest in certain things in that country. I don't think they're allowed to buy Bitcoin in China right now. So I mean that's the reality. Like I said, it's just the zombie economy as a result of overregulation by a state body or government. The whole thing is the government needs to get the hell out of the way and let the economy, flourish and do its thing. You know what I mean? Like Adam Smith talks about with the Wealth of Nations. Let the market dictate. As you said, with the invisible hand, right? Is what he referred to it as.
Yes, I was talking about this with a lot of friends from Europe specifically, and the main thing that I've noticed is that in Europe there are a lot of countries, mainly Deutschland, Germany, that had a lot of regulations. Like 80 times that I had an idea for a business with them, they will say, "Oh no, it happens that there is this regulation, there is this tax," and then I go like, "Dude, you cannot even scratch your ass without having the government to give you permission and having to pay a tax for it, dude. Come on, like all of these, the government is getting in the way, putting these taxes and regulations and stuff. It's just literally just they're just stopping the economy to grow, just like what's happening here." And now that these regulations, these ministries that are literally just in the way of progress, economical progress, and now Argentina is going back to what it used to be. Prices are going down, inflation is going down, banks are trusting the economy once again and giving away mortgages, and
Yeah, I mean
like,
that's the
what?
thing though. Like, so how's the employment? Employment's going up. That's the thing. So like inflation, deflation is very important if you have strong economic growth and employment.
Huh.
So when you have strong employment and you have deflation, that means that you have a growing economy. You have a very healthy economy. Versus in the United States, like I just pointed out, as you can see in the ticker, we have rising unemployment. Our inflation is still above 2%, which is what the Fed's idea was to get below 2%. So technically, it's still high in their eyes, even though it's fabricated. It's not real.
Yeah.
It's probably closer to 16, maybe 20%, which is what Shadow Stats has pointed out. Because they're using the old metrics for the data analysis than what the current government uses.
Yeah, not to show
So
the real numbers.
exactly, it's a way to cook the book, so to speak. It's fraud and oversight. That's basically it. So yeah, I mean, like I said, my data analysis is that we are in recession. We've been in recession since October last year,
Mm.
and because when you adjust for inflation, December was a wash. The consumer price index and the GDP growth evened out. It was at zero. There was no economic growth. It was zero because of the stimulus, zombie economy. And then like you look at each quarter thereafter, and it's the GDP growth is not strong enough to really demonstrate a vibrant and economically viable country. It's showing that there is a lot of hiccups on the way. The unemployment, and like I said, it's done by surveys, so it's not necessarily a very accurate sample. And technically, because I'm an academic, I'm a professor, so like I publish articles, and I couldn't publish an article with the type of data analysis and the type of data that they're extracting for the unemployment numbers from the federal government. I wouldn't be able to get that published because it wouldn't be accurate information. It wouldn't be an accurate sample. So just take that for what you will.
Pretty much. One question. One of the patterns that I have been noticing here is that, that what you're saying with the zombie economy thing is that there are a lot of people that are not only not producing, but living off taxes in two ways. One might be because you're connected to the system, you are related to someone in the government, and uh, you're literally having a luxurious life out of money from the government, which in the end is just a taxpayer's money. And the other one is you're in the on the bad side of living from the state, which is gifts, subsidization, and that kind of stuff. There used to be a lot of people here that were not even Argentinian, but they were receiving education, free education, free food, money, even places to live that obviously were not the best, but these were known as slums or the projects or misery villages as we know them here. Are you noticing a big amount of people who are living off the state right now in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, obviously pensioners, and that's normal because we have the boomers, the retirees. They outnumber the other demographics, I think, close to 2 to 1, give or take. So a lot of them have retired. I think the last boomer to retire is going to be within the next, between now and the next 5 years. You'll have most boomers will be retired. So they're all going to be that was the big issue 5 years ago, 10 years ago during George W. Walker Bush and what's his name, the conspiracy guy with the ministry. He was pushing that we were going to be 10 feet underwater throughout the world in less than 5 years.
Oh, yes, I know who you're talking about, but I forgot his name. Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, so it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
So anyway, that was the big issue. That was the big topic in the Republican Party. Was that we were going to run out of Social Security money and Medicaid. And that was the whole push for this immigration was to basically offset the amount of funds for the for the entitlement programs so that they can tax more. Basically, instead of creating younger populations, which is healthy for an economy, is to have big families and because that obviously stimulates the economy because you have to pay for clothes and schools and different types of stuff that stimulates the economy. And you replace it with people that are already adult, like military age adults that basically you can. That's why you have most of the military age men coming over because they go work, right, send money overseas, but a lot of them are working at the table, or they're working illegally, or they're basically getting benefits, or they're committing crimes. A lot of them, I'm not saying all of them, but a huge percentage. And it's that zombie economy. They're not stimulating enough economic growth because they're working minimum wage jobs or low paying jobs. They're not paying much into Social Security and Medicaid to offset that cost. Because I think that Medicaid and Social Security is basically bankrupt. It's been bankrupt for probably 5 years now. Sorry to go off, and the graphs are go off topic, but it's kind of really going back to what you're saying. Yeah, you do have a lot of people on disability, people that just they can't find a job or they don't want to work, and they just give them disability. You have like single mothers that basically they get a baby rent check or basically alimony or like child support, and then they go on disability and they get all their kids on disability. And they basically live off of the state, and they live off of the working man, the man that's paying all the bills. So you have a bunch of people. I think who was it? What's his name? I can't remember his name, but he made the analogy that basically it's people carrying the average people are carrying the turnip cart, and everybody's pulling it. They're putting their share in. And then, the first person's like, I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. I got to sit up in there for a little bit. And then the next person's like, well, if they're going to sit up there, I'm going to go up there too. And then now you only have like 2 or 3 people pulling this wagon or this turnip cart, and everybody's just sitting in the back and just not doing shit. And that's disaster. Basically, you go nowhere. The economy comes to almost a halt, and then nothing gets done, and you don't have no more progression. So the food can't get to its destination. The turnips can't get to the processor to sell the market. So everybody starves. Everybody fails, and that's what we're seeing is that the immigrants aren't as productive as they need to be, and they're not paid enough to pay enough in the taxes to produce, to cover the amount of losses or budgets that are being enacted, the amount of money being sent overseas. On top of that, you have, like I said, you have retirees, you have people retiring, coming out of the workforce. You have a lot of Zoomers. You have youth unemployment, which is probably 30%. The real unemployment rate in America has got to be at least 20 to 30% for Zoomers and younger millennials that can't find a job in their profession, let alone a job in general. There's only so many McDonald's jobs. There's only so many Starbucks jobs, coffee barista jobs. There's only so many baggers and cashier jobs at the local supermarket. So I mean, like eventually they're going to start hiring people part-time with no benefits. There's only so many stalkers
there's so many people that can do this job. Like if you don't like the payment, then just go somewhere else. I can find anyone that will do this job instead of you.
100%.
Yeah.
So that's the reality. I mean, like it's like I said, it's a zombie economy. You don't have enough. Really, what it comes down to is you don't have enough people working. You don't have enough. The people that are working, they're not making enough income to have disposable income to buy consumer products. So they're borrowing the money on debt.
Save.
Yeah, they can't save or anything. So they're living on debt in order to live a lifestyle or to just basically make ends meet. And when they start getting laid off, now they have no job instead of a part-time job, and they're already living with family or friends, or they have roommates, or they're renting a room, or they're living in their car, they're doing van life, or they're living on the street.
Oh, dude,
And
yes, yeah, I know about that. I
yeah,
have
so
never seen
now,
that. I have never seen that here. I have never seen anyone
yeah.
living inside of their car here.
Oh no, I see it all the time here. I see people living on the street. Like I see people living in tents, all over America. There's a YouTuber that shows that he has a YouTube channel. I can't remember his name. I can post it in the chat later in the Telegram chat. I post his videos all from time to time. So if you guys want to go see him, you can go to the Telegram channel that's in the description. Join our Telegram channel, and I post a lot of stuff we talk about in the podcast in that channel constantly. We have great discussions outside of what we're talking about here. We can go further in depth because even this is just kind of a sample of what we talk about on the Telegram channel. But yeah, basically, the situation is that it's a failed system. It's a zombie economy. It's only going to last until the golden calf is done, like the Soviet Union. The difference between the Soviet Union collapse and the United States collapse is that the Soviet Union only traded within itself in a very niche set of countries, and most of those countries were basically Soviet Union was a nanny state, so it was literally just funding those countries like Cuba, who had no real domestic output other than a few things, and they were heavily dependent on the Soviet Union income, like aid,
Yeah, big
just like the United
cigars.
States.
What a great what a what a great thing for the USSR economy. Big cigars from Cuba.
Yeah, and that's it. Tourism and cigars, and then like
Yeah,
maybe some alcoholic beverages and beer. That's really about it,
exactly.
So there wasn't much incentive for Soviet Union other than just to piss off the United States to fund Cuba, basically. But the United States does it as well. They send aid to Iran. They send aid to North Korea, but we won't talk about that because the EU sends aid to North Korea to keep that puppet keep that puppet government in power, so that they can sell weapons to Japan and Korea and things like that, and Taiwan.
Yeah.
They keep the CCP government in power so that they could sell weapons to Taiwan and so on and so forth. So it's the same, but like you said, it's an economic model where because it's supposedly a capitalist system, free market trade system. They have a little bit more power because countries are using the global economy is using the dollar as a reserve currency, and the U.S. through its proxies is producing consumer goods like China and different places in Mexico that's producing the American products on a multicultural level or multinational level. So where they're using them as vessel states to keep the empire in power, but eventually when the dollar starts to collapse, and these countries can no longer sustain any type of economic growth because the dollar is no longer strong enough to where it's worth it for them to keep these American companies in their country. That means the U.S. is going to either have to pass a very, very expensive jobs bill and train people in skilled jobs to send them to work in industrial capacities like manufacturing and engineering and mining and things of that nature.
Making people produce
Making people
important
produce.
stuff. Yes.
Exactly. Or collapses. And I'm kind of on the sense that it's going to collapse. Because like Soviet Union, they were producing things and they were selling things to these niche countries. They were sending medical supplies and certain types of military equipment as well as like food and different things, to the point where the Soviet Union, due to the Cold War, they started shutting down factories and turning them into military depots. So they stopped producing consumer goods and they started producing military equipment. And it got to a point where they started having food shortages, and the countries they were trading with were seeing food shortages because they were getting it mostly from Russia, Soviet Union. And that's what we're seeing.
I remember that I have seen some propaganda from the time. And most of the stuff that they were showing, for example, if you look up right now the anthem of the USSR, you will find the video, obviously, with the anthem. And what do you see? you see the Soviet Union producing stuff. You have seen metallurgic workers. You have seen workers of the train and all that kind of stuff. So most of the propaganda that they made was literally them producing stuff.
Yeah, they like I said, they were when they had the empire, especially with the Baltic states and the Eastern Bloc countries, predominantly Ukraine, which Ukraine produced a lot of agriculture. Very large state. It's roughly the size of Texas. I mean, there's so much resources in Ukraine, and it was so important to Russia, which is why Russia put, it was one of the only states outside of Russia country and Soviet Union where the military depots were and the military bases and equipment was located because it was such an important country for the economy of the Soviet Union. And when Gorbachev started, like his progressive policies and letting these Western Eastern Bloc countries gave them independence, brought down the Berlin Wall and then liberated, East and West Germany. A lot of the brain drain, so to speak, a lot of the skilled workers and educated, workforce started to leave the Soviet Union. They became independent. And a lot of the food and agriculture and consumer goods that were being made in these countries wasn't coming in anymore. And then it was just a matter of time before the collapse, basically.
Huh.
That's what we're
So,
seeing in the United States.
so making a summary of the whole conversation, the thing with the zombie economy is the country is not producing uh, as important stuff as they should be making. People are more interested in stuff that is not important, like making TikToks, for example, or having a gender degree. The interest rate, inflation is going up. The US dollar is becoming a currency that is not trustworthy anymore.
It's devalued. Yeah.
Yeah, and what was the other part? There are a lot of
Unemployment rates,
people
unemployment rates going up because people don't have job skills. All they have is like, basic skill jobs for like a consumer based economy.
exactly. So people don't have jobs, so they cannot afford to live in a house. But when they have the money to go somewhere else that is cheaper for buying a place, they get stuck. They get stuck in a debt that they cannot even pay back because first their original job doesn't, they don't have it anymore, and the place that they live in, there are no places to go work, so they're just stuck in bed in debt with a debt that they cannot pay back. And the migrants that once went to the US, those that went there specifically for having a better life, they're going back to their countries because it's more economically feasible for them to go back to their countries than stay in the US because of the whole situation. And pretty much in some years, in some years the empire of the US will fall.
Yeah, pretty much.
Hmm.
I think it'll collapse. I think it'll collapse sooner than later. And it's the reason why it's going to collapse is plain and simply because the people that are here have lost faith in the government. You can see it. You can see that people are. It's not so much that it's a zombie economy, because a zombie economy can obviously go on for a long period of time. But it's a simple fact that people are losing faith in the currency. They're losing faith in the government, the system as a whole. And when that happens, like that's like Rome, it just collapses. People no longer feel confident in the government, and they leave.
Would you trust in a government that is led by a guy that doesn't even know where he's at?
Well, that's the whole point of the zombie economy. The most powerful leader in the free world is literally a walking zombie.
Uh-huh. And the guy that is on the other side of the choice is a criminal
Yeah,
that
he's
is
convicted
to be in
criminal.
jail. Yes.
Yeah, he's going. I think here very soon, within a short period of time. I think the next week or two, he's going to sentencing hearing, and they could sentence him to prison, and that means the election's over because I don't know who are they gonna get to run for the Republican ticket. They're gonna have to do another. They're gonna have to do another. What is it called?
Election.
Yeah, they'll have to do another primary to select a new Republican, or they can. I guess
Republican
all
and a
the
new Democrat.
yeah, and then like the Democrats want Biden to step down, so they're going to have to have a primary again for the Democratic side. So they're going to have to postpone the elections. I was saying that this was probably going to happen. I said this in the chat. I'm sorry we're closing, but like I said this like 6 months ago in the chat in the Telegram channel that I didn't think we're going to have elections this year. I think they're going to postpone them or something was going to happen, and that's what it's looking like now. That the two candidates that are running for political office that have been selected by these two major parties, Coke or Pepsi, Democrat, Republican, they both
One is a
are at
zombie
the
and
point.
the other one is a criminal.
Yeah, they're at the point where they're not fit for office. So I mean, what do you do in that situation? You have to suspend elections. I hate being right all the time. I really hate being right all the time, but it's just.
It is what it is. I don't make the
what it is.
rules. I just notice the patterns.
Yeah.
Well, we had
But
something
that
like
being,
that here. Like
uh-huh.
when it comes to when it comes to choosing a leader for the nation,
Mhm.
we had that the best guy that the left, this party, Juntos por la Patria, United for the Fatherland, well, Together for the Fatherland will be a better translation. The best guy that they managed to find from their side was the Minister of Economy. That was the main reason why Argentina was in the situation it was. So the other guy was the guy that has been explaining to every Argentinian on television uh, why the situation of Argentina is how it is and how can we fix it and who are the ones to blame for the situation. He ended up winning. He was right. He's doing everything well. He's doing all of these things right. And when you look up the polls for popularity, or how do you say, the support of the people, when you go ask which on the side of the Peronists, the left, which of the side of the Peronists would you vote in the case that they go for representing Peronism, and always like this is January, all the ballots just go to no one, like all of them, all of the politicians that were in Argentina before the arrival of Milei, they were so horrible. We know what they have done. A lot of news of them committing horrible stuff, promoting shitty policies that were against our interests. They were so bad that no one is there left to represent their party. Literally. You have, for example, Grabois, who is literally a communist that ended up literally seizing a land, a privately owned land, and it didn't succeed because he didn't even know how to cultivate on it. So he just left. You also have Guillermo Moreno, who is the guy that every time that he's on TV, he talks about how good it will be to fill the country with black people for some reason. You have Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, who was the most, how do you say, who was the most corrupt woman in Argentina ever. She was the vice president the last year, and she was the president of Argentina twice. She has stolen a lot of stuff. She has like a lot of properties, like really luxurious properties, to her name. A lot of money that she couldn't justify where she got it and stuff like that. And outside of them, there's no one else. Like, who are you gonna vote for? Massa, the guy that made Argentina the mess it is now. Literally, the difference here is that we have a good guy that ended up explaining to people how to get out of the situation. He's actually doing it. The case in the US is that there is no one left that can be a good face for the party, the Democrats or the Republicans, or can you say this? Can you say otherwise? Who would you say that is there for the parties?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, basically, like the thing is, the people have selected their people. They've selected the representatives that they wanted to run for their political party, and that was Donald Trump and Joseph Biden. This is who the people want for the representative. And the thing about the United States is it's a representative republic or democracy, if you will.
Hmm.
And I don't know how the people react. And that's what I was saying about a collapse in 2025, because when, government officials, elected assholes, as Gerald Slinte calls them, when they are telling the people that you voted for to represent you can no longer run because they're not fit for office, how do you think the people are gonna accept that? I mean, how are they going to react to that? Like, so you're telling me we had a primary. This is the person we voted for that was chosen to represent us, our party, and the American people. And now we can't vote for them because you don't feel you as a government don't feel that they're fit for office. That's revolutionary type stuff. That's civil unrest type stuff, man. That's coup d'etat type stuff.
Literally.
That's
what I'm telling you.
That stuff. That's something that happens in like third world, like literally like banana republics, like really like Zimbabwe, or like anarchies, like what's that country called? Somalia. Like that's shit that happens. Yeah, that's like shit that happens there. That's a Somalian type government system, where like some African Congo country where like the government, like literally they don't, like somebody, some diamond miner or somebody, doesn't like the fact that this person got the ticket, and they had them, even though they had a mock, political election, and they still somehow got in, and they're just like, oh, just kill them. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that shit that you see there, or like put them in prison. You know what I mean? Most of the time they find something on them, they put them in prison to get rid of them. That's usually what happens in these third world countries or developing economies.
Yeah,
where they
none of them is clean. If you look him up, you will surely 100% find a reason to put him in jail, for sure.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. There's some trumped up charges, no pun intended, and they're just like, all right, we'll put them away for 4 years, so we don't have to deal with them, and then we'll release them, and then we'll tell them, look, if you try to run again, you'll go here for the rest of your life, and then we'll torture you every day, kind of like they did to Gonzalo Lira. The Ukrainian government, Zelensky did to Gonzalo Lira, tortured him to death until he died. An American citizen, but he got like 5 minutes of talk time from the White House, and the Department of State was like, gave their condolences to his family, but they didn't do anything about getting him out of Ukraine. So yeah, it is what it is. So,
it is what it is.
So I guess we'll close with that. I appreciate, like I said, coming on, and I think we had a really good discussion, and I hope everybody enjoys it. And remember, guys, go ahead and like and follow, and check out our teller.
1775.
Yeah, exactly. Buy some coffee, buy an e-bike, and support the channel. So if you want to send $1 to support us, that's great. You could go to, I have buy me a coffee. You can send like $1. But that being said, I'm gonna close.
Nobody intended.
Nobody. Exactly. That being said, it was nice having you, and like I said, hopefully you come on again in the future. And yeah, you guys, good night, man, and enjoy the decline, and enjoy the zombie economy and the apocalypse that's coming. The zombie apocalypse. Good night.
Good night.